Awesome. So hello, everyone. My name is Angie. I'm the program manager for the Business Center Guelph-Wellington. And today we are back with our Bridges to Better Business program. Yesterday we had a fun event with IG at their Innovation Expo. So I hope everybody who did attend that had a great time. We look forward today to Karen Davis. She'll be talking about, oh, I'm always so behind on things in my brains, but we were going to have so much fun about creativity and your business. Why am I like this today? Either way, develop and sustain organizational productivity. That's what we're talking about today. It is Friday. Welcome to Friday, Angie Brain. I hope everybody is okay with that. We will manage. We'll get through this. If you have questions and you're watching live on Facebook, feel free to add them in the comments section. I will be monitoring that throughout the live session. If you have questions after the fact, please still add them to the comment section or send me an email at success@guelphbusiness.com, and we'll get them over to Karen and get those answered for you either way. If you're watching this on YouTube, same thing for you. So today, Karen, thank you for joining us. I will pass this over to you, but I'm here if you need me.
Great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to jump right in and share my screen. Get that set up.
Yeah, it should work. Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to get going here. So this is all about how to make pigs fly. We are looking at how to develop a workplace culture that fosters creativity. I am Karen Davis. My business is called Pink Pigs Fly, and I am the founder and chief creativity strategist. So first question. I don't know how old everyone is here, and this is probably showing my age, but how many of you remember walking into this place on a Friday night, Saturday night? This was sort of the place to hang out, place to be. It is, of course, Blockbuster. It was certainly part of my regular routine. It was always a fun outing. And what about this? We have Kodak film, when you actually had to wrestle with the film and put it into the camera and get it to click in and try to get it to forward properly. And oh, yes, so okay, Kodak. And lastly, how many of you remember this product? This was a Palm Pilot. This was a calendar, contacts, you could write on it. It was the coolest. I had one, I loved it. I thought it was just amazing because I could fit all my notes and all my calendar stuff into my bag without having to take my big, huge day timer. So this was a pretty exciting product back in the day. So what do these companies have in common? Well, it's a few things. We obviously know that these companies are really no longer in existence. We know that Blockbuster is obsolete, closed down, went bankrupt. We know that Kodak certainly is not the company that it used to be, and Palm Pilot, it disappeared as well. So what happened? Why did these companies become obsolete? Well, there's a few reasons, but one of the main reasons is that they did not optimize creativity in their organization. They were not able to have the vision, the imagination to see what was coming in the future. They thought they had something that was great at the time. They went, great, we're doing well, this is cool, we're gonna just sit here and we're just gonna keep going. And what happens? Things change, things evolve, and they did not have that foresight to be able to evolve as things changed around them. So interesting story with Blockbuster is that they were actually approached by Netflix early on, in early days when they were still using, so before we went digital, Netflix was using DVDs, and they would mail them out to company or people at home, and then you'd mail them back. And during this phase, they were preparing for the digital era, and went to Blockbuster and said, hey, you know, this is what the future entails. This is what we think, we've got this great business. You should buy us out. And Blockbuster went, no, we're good. Thanks, see ya. Probably a very big decision that they regret. Kodak, same idea. So Kodak had film, they had cameras, did not anticipate the digital era of cameras. They were at the forefront. They're a huge company. They should have and could have been the company moving into digital cameras and sustaining themselves throughout that change. They were not. Palm Pilot, same idea. Palm Pilot had this vision of the contact information and the calendar, but didn't have the foresight to think about combining that with the telephone, and missed a huge opportunity in terms of developing smartphones. So, quick little introduction about who I am and what I do. So I am super passionate about lots of things. A few of them, I have a dog. I love my dog. We spend lots of time together. When I'm walking, I get great ideas. Hanging out in nature. I am a sports fan, and unfortunately, I'm not so happy with Toronto sports of late. I'm a huge Blue Jay fan, so that was pretty big bummer. We'll see what the Raptors and the Leafs can do this year, but I'm not having a whole lot of optimism there. Reading, I love reading. I have a background in adult education, and I got into creativity really by accident. While I was doing training, I was always trying to find a new way of doing things. I was always trying to, like, how can I make this different? How can I make this unique? And really ended up realizing that the whole underlying theme of what I was doing was all focused on creativity. So at that point in time, I actually, by accident again, found out that creativity had its whole own academic field, which was absolutely fascinating for me. And I went back to school to study creativity, to understand the science behind creativity. So all of the work that I do is all founded in science, which I absolutely love. I'm always writing or doing something that's creative. I spend a lot of time doodling and doing visioning exercises and journaling. And I'm also always listening to music. Those are some of the things that I do. So let's get back to innovation. Why innovation and why now? Well, the research shows without a doubt that innovation leads to an increase in market share, an increase in revenue, an increase in growth and longevity. So it's something that all businesses need to do, particularly in this day and age. So the last several years has taught us a lot, and mostly that we are in a state of constant change. We do not know what's around the corner. We're in a situation where we're actually in a time where we're experiencing a faster rate of change than any other time in history. And there's a lot of volatility that we're dealing with. So we need to be constantly responding to that in a way that continues to grow our businesses. And in fact, I know just even in the last couple of days, RBC's come out saying that the recession is going to hit earlier than they anticipated. They're looking now at Q1 of next year. So I mean, we've got another challenge right around the corner in terms of business. So what is innovation? I have a lot of discussions with business people and organizations, and sometimes actually defining some of these concepts around creativity and innovation can be challenging. So I always want to start at the foundation and make sure that we're really talking about the same concepts in the same way with the same language. So there's two types of innovation. There's innovation that is incremental, and there's innovation that's disruptive. And really what we're looking at in terms of innovation is something that is new, something that is unique and useful in the marketplace. So it is out there and it is being sold and it's being purchased. We also can talk about social innovation and internal innovation, really talking, that's more around impact, particularly social innovation. But we're going to focus on innovation from a business perspective today. So incremental and disruptive, let's have a look at what we mean by incremental innovation. So here's an example of incremental innovation. First ketchup bottle by Heinz was a glass bottle, and I remember when I was little, I would turn it upside down and be pounding on the bottle, trying to get the ketchup out. It was always a struggle, never get that last bit of ketchup out. Well, the next bottle that they designed was a plastic bottle that you could squeeze. So you were able to get a lot more of that ketchup out of the bottom of it. And then finally, they came up with the upside down bottle. Well, this was the greatest thing because now you could, instead of trying to lean it up against something and have it all come to the bottom, it was already in that position. You can just have it sitting there and all the ketchup falls to the bottom. So this is an example of small incremental changes to a product where you're seeing an improvement in value to the customer, to the person who's purchasing over a period of time. There's lots of other examples of incremental innovation. We could look at the suitcase. That's a great example as well. When I was young, my family had suitcases that were big and had a handle, and that was it. You had to lug them around. There was no wheels. That didn't exist on suitcases originally. You just had to pick them up, carry them up the stairs, drag them up the stairs. Then the first incremental innovation on the suitcase was when they put two wheels on one side of the suitcase. But when you were dragging them through the airport, if you made any type of turn or slight, had a curve, they would tip over. And actually, even before that, they had suitcases that had four wheels on them, but only on the bottom. So you had to, and no really long handle. So that was even before the two wheels. Finally, they come up with the wheels that actually spin. So whenever you move, wherever you're taking that suitcase, it follows you and it is easy to move. So that's another example of incremental innovation. So now we're going to look at disruptive innovation. So here are some examples of disruptive innovation. First, you can't talk about disruptive innovation without talking about Apple. So here we're looking at the first iPhone back in 2007. And that is absolutely a game changer in terms of a product that disrupted the industry. Also Airbnb, and of course we have Uber. And so when we're talking about disruptive innovation, we are looking at innovation that actually changes an industry and requires that industry and other industries to shift, to have to respond to that product or service. So with the iPhone, we can think about how many things changed when we had access to an iPhone. Suddenly banks started to think about how can we use an iPhone to adapt banking services. Transportation had all of a sudden was, how can we adopt that? Shopping. I mean, you start to think of all of the different ways that the iPhone changed the way we live and the way we work. That is what disruptive innovation looks like. With Airbnb, they came along and really disrupted the hotel and accommodation industry. And what's interesting there is that when you look at all of a sudden hotels were trying to figure out, okay, now what do? We're losing revenue because people are going to Airbnb. And even in terms of, if you're looking at condos in big cities, all of a sudden they have to respond to, we have all of these people who are now using their own home condos to rent out on Airbnb. What kind of policies and practices do we need to put in place in response? So again, that disruptive industry really shifting the way we look at a larger industry and associated industries. And of course, the same with Uber. So with Uber, of course, the taxi industry was definitely impacted in a way that they did not anticipate, and that has shifted things quite a bit for that group. So what is this whole relationship to creativity? What is the connection between creativity and innovation? One of my challenges when I'm working with businesses is that there's usually an understanding and a need for, or understanding that there is a need for innovation. It's often written into their priorities. It's written into who they are as a company. But what's often missing is creativity. So what are we talking about in terms of creativity? Well, I'm going to start with talking about 3 myths around creativity, because sometimes it's easier to talk about what it's not versus what it is. So 3 different myths that I often face when I am talking about creativity. The first is that creativity is just really about arts. It's about arts, it's about drawing, painting, maybe music and writing, dance, theater, but that's really all. A lot of people truly believe that that is what we mean when we're talking about creativity. Of course, we know that creativity is so much more than the arts. Creativity is around the way you think and what you can create. And it really can have an impact on any industry, any field. It's really about change. The second myth is that there's this idea around that creativity really comes from a muse, or you have that moment when you have that, there's that aha moment where people think, oh yeah, I just thought of that idea, and it's like this light bulb moment. And really, creativity, it works because you're doing so many other things along the way. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It doesn't come out of thin air. It comes because you're doing different things in terms of your habits or your thinking processes or your mindset. And we'll get into that in more detail later. And then the third is that you're either born creative or you're not. Some people are like, no, I'm not creative, never been creative, and I never will be creative. And there's this sort of fear of, well, what does it mean if I admit that I'm creative? What are you going to ask me to do? When I do live workshops and I'm doing a lot more hands-on activities, the hands are really hesitant to go up when I ask, who thinks they're creative, because they really are not sure what I'm going to ask them to do. But creativity, the research shows that we are actually all born creative. And as children, over a period of time, we start to lose our creativity. So this study was done, it was a longitudinal study that showed that each year there was sort of as children, and then in primary school, middle school, high school, and into adults, each segment we actually lose a portion of our creativity. Which is why, as adults, a lot of people feel like they are not creative. The good news is, of course, is that we can help people become reconnected to their creativity, and they can get back in touch with that creative side of themselves and pull that into whatever work that they're doing into their life as adults. But you can also think about the school system in terms of how did that happen over a period of years. You start off in kindergarten, you have these playful environments where play and fun and imagination and curiosity are all fostered and facilitated. And then you get into schools where it's more about following the rules, and you're sitting at desks and you're not moving around, and you're just told this is what the answer is, and this is what you have to remember. So it's really interesting to see how that creativity can sort of be depleted over a period of time. So creativity is really about producing something that is novel and useful. It's not just an idea, it's taking an idea and actually doing something with it. And creativity it's about looking at things differently, it's about solving problems, and it's also about optimizing and taking advantage of opportunities that come up as well. So I always like to sort of make this connection between creativity and innovation. You can be creative without innovation, but you cannot have innovation without creativity. So creativity is the foundation of innovation. And in a lot of businesses who talk about innovation and talk about that being a priority, the foundational piece is often missing. So now here's a great example to show you the difference between innovation and creativity. So this is a Zamboni type product that was created that you can put on the back of your ATV. If you live out in the country, if you've got a great big area and you want to create your own ice rink, you can hook it on and set it up, and you can have a Zamboni to clean and pour that hot water over your ice and keep it pretty amazing. This is a product, it was developed, it was put into the marketplace, and you can purchase that. So that is an innovation. Here, we've got this great little example of creativity. This is a little guy on a little tricycle on the ice rink with a bucket and some contraption of, I think it's probably a towel and some hot water. And he's pulling that around his little backyard ice rink to do the same thing. But this is creative and not innovation, because this is just for internal use. It's just for their home. It's not being taken out into the marketplace. So I love that example of being able to see the difference between creativity and innovation. But you can imagine that the producers of the one that did go to market would have envisioned something like this as a prototype, as something like, well, hey, we can sort of make this connection between an ATV or a tricycle and some kind of bucket on the back. So creativity is also, because it's so intricately combined with innovation, it is connected to profits for business. It's also increased to efficiencies and productivity. And because creativity can be beneficial not only in terms of innovation, but also in terms of how the business operates internally. So you can be looking at being creative around efficiencies, how to be more productive, how the systems work internally. That's all, there's all sorts of ways that creativity can be used to improve how the business operates. Creativity is also connected to increased employee engagement. We know that through research. And it's also, creativity has been linked to an improved well-being and mental health, which we know, of course, connected to engaging employees and ensuring their well-being. So it's a really interesting connection there, and another sort of business case for why creativity is so important in business. And it's also how you retain top talent. So I know for myself, there was many jobs that I had at the beginning of my career where I was not able to be as creative as I wanted to be. I was often stifled in different ways. And I left because I just could not, I couldn't see a way to be the person that I wanted to be, and I knew I could be in an environment that didn't foster creativity for me. And I've heard that from many, many entrepreneurs. So it's a sort of an ongoing theme in terms of top talent for sure. So there was a study done by Adobe that showed that actually 75% of people, so these include your employees, do not believe that they're living up to their creative potential. So that's a huge connection again to maintaining top talent, is being able to provide employees with an opportunity to be creative and fulfill and really optimize their creativity. So big question, how do we become a creative business? How do we become a business that actually fosters and facilitates creativity? So we really need to look at talking about creativity in a different way. We need to look at being deliberate with creativity, which is often people find really, really strange, because again, they kind of think of creativity as being really kind of spontaneous and something you can't plan for. But we need to find a way of, as businesses, we cannot wait for an idea to just suddenly pop into someone's head. We need to plan for, be deliberate, and be strategic with how we are creative in our businesses. So this is part. I have two parts of a framework that I use in the work that I do to help businesses become more creative and really leverage the power of creativity to drive innovation. So there's the mindset. So how, what are individuals thinking? Do they have a creative mindset, and can they sustain that over a period of time? The second is skills and processes. The third is practices, and we can look at that in the same way as sort of routines or habits. And then the fourth is environment and culture. And really, we're going to dive really more deeply into the culture and the environment, but all of these things need to exist in order for innovation to be optimized. If one area doesn't exist, it's just not going to work in the same way or for the same length of time. The other component to the framework and how I work is that we need to look at creativity from 3 different perspectives. We need to look at it from the individual, so the individual employee, from a team perspective and collaboration. And then we need to look at it from an organizational perspective, and that's really where leadership falls into that third area as well. So when you take the 2 parts of that framework, this is what we're looking at. So we're looking again at the mindset, the skills, practices, and culture, and we're looking at things from an individual, a team, and an organizational perspective. And different components of the framework on the right fit with the framework on the left. So for example, the mindset obviously is something that is an individual, works specifically with individuals, and that has to be fostered through work that individuals do. Skills is something that both individuals and teams can look at. Processes is really around how teams work together. The practices are both individual and team, and really even into organizational. And then the environment and culture is really at the organizational level, because it has to be a top-down, something that's implemented top-down from leadership. I'm going to stop here and just make sure we don't have any questions. Angela, is there anything that I need to? No, we're good. Okay.
No,
so
you're good across the board.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to go into a little more detail into the first 3 of those areas. So mindset, what we're talking about when we're talking about mindset are things like being comfortable with complexity. Even just looking at this framework, people think that creativity is kind of this simple concept. It's not. It really has a lot of depth to it. So when we're working in creativity, there's a lot of complexity and there's a lot of ambiguity. And we have to be comfortable sitting within that and not knowing the answers right away, having things a little bit messy. And that can be really difficult for some people who want, to figure stuff out right away. But you got to sort of take some time to be comfortable with that. We're also looking at things from different perspectives. We are looking at how to use your imagination, because if you cannot envision that future product, service, or way of working, then you cannot build it. And that really goes back to some of those first companies that we looked at, Blockbuster, Netflix, and Palm Pilot. They really didn't connect with their imagination to be able to see how the future might unfold and how their products needed to evolve. We're also talking about things like curiosity. Asking questions is really the foundation of curiosity, of course. And if we're not asking questions about how might this look, how might this be in the future, how might I connect in a different way? So always asking questions is critical to creativity. We're looking at things like a learning, a growth mindset is involved in this. The fact that we're always learning, we're always connecting to new things. We always have to be open to taking that knowledge in and learning new ways of working. Systems is definitely part of mindset. So being able to sort of have a systems perspective of how things are connected. Play is part of this as well. So being open to novelty and open to play, a sense of playfulness. And then making connections is also a really interesting one, because a lot of ideas, a lot of new products and services that are part of innovation are really a connection or a combination of 2 things that already exist. So an example of that is the smartphone. Really that was taking almost the Palm Pilot concept and combining that with the telephone to create a smartphone. And there's a great example of a doctor in Toronto who took the idea from the airline industry and adapted that for the operating room in hospitals. And the idea was that he looked and saw how black boxes were used to manage data and to record, system failures. And he took that concept and built a black box for an operating room. And so it would be able to record the conversations of the medical staff, would be able to record all of the machines and how they were working and everything that was going on during an operation, so that they could then go back and look at it if something went wrong. So we often get stuck sort of looking and reading about and listening to things that are only in the field that we work in. Whereas we really have to be creative, we really have to open that up and look at lots of things from different areas, because that's where we make those connections that we wouldn't otherwise make. So that was mindset. Next one is process and skills. So the two processes that I use and often combine in the work that I do is design thinking and creative problem solving. And they're similar, they have some unique components to them. But also one of the challenges that I face is that organizations will say, yeah, we do design thinking, and think that's the entire way that they're creative and innovative, and that's all they have to do. But really, that is just one process within a larger framework. So it's just one tiny bit. So just because an organization it does design thinking does not make them automatically innovative. Another component around the skills that I do a lot of work with is around divergent and convergent thinking. So the idea of, often we hear in the media that, brainstorming doesn't work. I've seen article after article that talks about brainstorming not working. It doesn't work when it's not done properly. I absolutely agree with that. Usually what happens, though, is that it's taken out of a larger process. So brainstorming is one component of what we do within creative problem solving. And it's really divergent thinking. You're thinking big, you're looking for multiple ideas. Where the failure often comes into play is that the process is then lacking a convergent thinking activity following that, which helps determine what idea you're going to move forward on, making decisions, having a little bit more critical thinking about the many ideas that you've come up with in brainstorming. So the process I work with is an ongoing, you'll be divergent thinking, you'll then move into a convergent thinking phase, and it goes over and over because it's part of the entire creative process until you get to the very end. The practices, really, it's about habits, routines around creativity. I love this quote, we are what we repeatedly do, and excellence is not an act, but a habit. So all of these things, the mindset, the skills, the processes, as well as the next component on culture, it's really about just continuing to do it over and over. If you have a once a year organizational retreat where you're doing something that's fun and creative, and that's all you do all year, it's similar to using design thinking. It's not enough. It's not going to lead you to being able to be continuously creative and sustain innovation over a period of time. So it's simpler. It's similar to a muscle. Creativity, it has to be used. It has to be part of everyday work. It has to be part of who you are as a business and how you operate as an individual. So the last section here is around culture. And there's so many components to this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each one. So diversity, there's so much research that shows how diversity supports creativity in the workplace. It includes that idea of having a diversity in thought. So the more diverse your group, the more experiences they're going to have, the more ideas and thoughts they're going to have that represent different ideas, different places, different experiences. And when those come together, that's where something new can come up in terms of an idea, a new way of working. So diversity is really critical. And of course, we know that there's a huge push towards diversity, inclusion, and equity. And that is something that organizations, I have partners that I work with around that as a big area on their own, but it does certainly connect to developing a creative culture. Transparency. So we know that when leaders are transparent, open with within their organizations, it absolutely allows employees to feel like they have the opportunity to be creative as well. Silos is the big one. So silos, we know in medium and large size companies, this whole idea of having these silos exist where there's information, ideas, work processes and flows, and they really do not cross over from one department or one area to another. Can also be through regional silos as well. And again, that is a barrier to creativity because you're just not making connections between what one group is doing and another, which again is where those new novel ideas can come from. Learning and reflection is one that you have to have in your culture, because it is the reflection period is where you can see what worked, see what didn't work. And it's really being deliberate about that. So not just sort of saying, yes, we are a learning and organization, but actually, how are you implementing that? What are the tangible things you're doing to show that you're learning and to talk about what you're learning as an organization? Similar to mindset, having a culture that fosters playfulness, humor, and fun, all critical because they are all deeply connected to being creative. Time is also an important one because we know that creativity can take time. Even when we're being deliberate with creativity, we need to have time for incubation. Incubation is that period of time where you're have an idea kind of rumbling around in the back of your head, or you're chatting at the water cooler, or you're having a walk at lunchtime and you may be discussing an idea. That's incubation. And incubation really does provide for greater creativity. Leadership. This is one where I've noticed many times when I've done training at organizations, and only the mid to lower level employees are involved in the training. They have this great experience. They start to understand how to be more creative. But if that hasn't been adopted by the leadership, they get stuck. So they don't feel like they have the support of leadership, and they cannot be as creative as they want to be without that support of the leadership. So leadership really has to take that model of, walk the talk. They need to be doing, talking, saying, and experiencing the things that they're asking for the rest of the organization to experience in terms of developing their creativity. And let's get a little bit more into a couple of them. So novelty is being open to novelty. This is what often happens at organizations. So there's all this talk about being innovative. There could be even talk about being creative. Let's change things up. But when it comes right down to it, they really want to stick with ideas that are comfortable, that are sort of in that zone of comfort. And moving out of that can be quite scary for some leaders. So there has to be that openness to novelty in order to break through creativity, to have sustainable innovation. And this is probably one of the biggest, being open to risk and failure. If organizations, again, they're sort of talking about being creative and being innovative, but isn't a culture where failure is accepted. You have to be able to be open to failure. You have to be able to support the employees who are trying to test and develop new ideas. They have to know that they're in a safe environment in order to do that. There are some companies, and I think Toyota is one of them, if I remember correctly, who actually celebrate the failures that they have within their company and organization. So not only are they talking about employees who did great things, but they're talking about, well, we tried this, we failed, let's celebrate that because it was a great experience, and really, again, connecting that back to the learning and reflection portion that we talk about in culture as well. So there's a lot of connections between these different components of developing a culture that fosters and facilitates creativity. Another one that's really important is the physical space. And even with companies moving to a hybrid situation in a lot of cases now, even if you get together to work on creative ideas and to develop some innovation in groups, the physical space is really important. We kind of thinking back to the images that I talked about in terms of looking at what kindergarten classes look like versus 8th grade classes, high school, and then into university when you're sitting in a big auditorium. The physical space in companies is just as important. And it includes things like, the colors, what's available in terms of the room of being flexible and moving things around to accommodate different group activities. And one really great example that I want to show you a short video on is Google. They have an area in their business called the Google Garage. And this is just the ultimate in creativity in terms of creating that physical space.
Oh, we're not hearing any sound.
Not hearing audio. Just turn my. No.
No. Sometimes with Zoom, if you're doing videos through it, if you're having I don't know if you're using headphones, but it has to go through your speaker and then re-picked up through your audio mic.
Okay. Well, even just looking at the images will help. I'll explain what they're talking about.
Perfect.
So really it's really about looking at start over again. It's really talking about having a space that is flexible. They can move all of the chairs, the tables, all of the furniture around. They have things that are used for prototyping ideas. So you can see there's the chairs on wheels. They can move that around really easily. And one of the things they really emphasize is that it's not necessarily fancy. Like this is Google, who obviously have a lot of money, but things are just kind of put on top of blocks with wheels on it, and they move them around and add different components that make being creative easier. So they have room for people to come together and do group work, and they have all of these random items that they can use when they're prototyping ideas. There's the tables moving. They have lots of whiteboard space. They have electronics hanging or outlets hanging from the ceiling. So there's lots of easy ways to connect your computers and all the electrical equipment they're using. But there's also a real element of play and fun that's also built into the space, as you can see. And just having that opportunity to kind of let down that normal business, culture and just move into this place where you're just you're just exploring, you're trying things that are new in this safe space. So it's a pretty amazing thing to have a look at. And there are companies that have looked at how can we create a space for our employees where they have something that's similar in terms of that kind of an environment. So I just want to sort of go back now. I'm going to sort of summarize some of what we've talked about, reconnect you back with that framework, which is so important. As I said, like when you're looking at the culture, part of the responsibility of developing that culture is also providing the opportunity for individuals to develop that mindset around creativity. It's about how to help them develop the skills as well as the processes. So, how do you get them to understand the skills, practice the skills as well, learn about the different components of design thinking and how that can be used in their work, or creative problem solving, the divergent and convergent thinking. This is all part of developing that culture. And then one of the key components, and what I find is often lacking, even in organizations that deem themselves or tend to be more on the creative side, is the way that it is sustained over a period of time. So what are the practices, what are the habits, the routines of individuals, of the teams, of the organization that allows that creativity to really be infused in the organization in a very natural way? So sort of in every different component of the organization, how is that creative element brought in and maintained? And that's really key to ensuring that innovation is sustained and not in these waves. And that's often what happens in organizations. They'll come up with one big idea, they're innovative, and then they kind of go into this down period where they're, that was it, that was their idea, and then they get stuck for a while. Some come back up, but some actually don't come back up. So it's really a part of, how do we create this environment and how do we sustain that over a period of time, so that we have that continuous creativity and innovation as a result.
There is a question. The question in the comments on our Zoom is, works in agriculture. Agriculture has where its risk is a huge issue, and client-based production agriculture are decidedly risk adverse for good reasons. They face a lot of it. Do you have suggestions on how to navigate the tension between risk and innovation?
Yeah, I think that really goes to leadership. And of course, when I'm talking about risk, I'm not talking about being crazy and irresponsible and throwing, without just throwing everything aside. But it's really having leadership say that if we are actually going to create something new, create something different, be on the leading edge, then that risk has to exist. We have to be in a position where we are allowing ourselves to try new things and for them to fail. So that it's partly a mindset, and it's partly part of developing that as a strategic component of your organization. And it's not easy, it takes time, but it is really absolutely the critical way to implement that, for sure.
Perfect. Aside from that, I think that was my only question. Doing the last double check of everything. Yeah, that's my only question. So.
All right. Well, if anyone else has any questions, I am I'm available to answer them, to connect, to chat. I can talk about creativity all day, any day. So absolutely connect with me. I've got my email here, Karen, with an I, at pinkpigsfly.com. And absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. I am active on LinkedIn, and that's where I like to hang out most of the time.
For those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, thank you for joining us. If you have any other questions or thoughts as we move through over the next few days, if you're watching this, please feel free to reach out to me, success@guelphbusiness.com, or to Karen directly, and we can have that conversation and help you out with any of those. I will hopefully see everybody again next week. So for those of you who are in the Zoom room, please stick around for a few seconds. And those of you who are online, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.